All right, perfect. So let me go back to the title slide there. All right, hello. Welcome to this evening's webinar introducing our new project called Community Action for the Bear Brook. This is meant to just be an informal sort of just introductory webinar for anyone interested in getting involved in the project and wants to learn more about what we do as a trust. So, first off, I think it would be best to go around and introduce ourselves. It looks like there's just two of us here at the moment, so that should go pretty quickly. But yeah, David, I'm not sure if your mic is working. If for some reason it's not, you can also put your introduction in the chat. Okay, yeah, no mic webcam. That's totally fine. If you would like to pop your name and then just say a little something about your connection to rivers. So maybe how you use them, why you think they're important, that sort of thing. And then also sort of what you're interested in regards to this project. But I will go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Chelsea. I am the volunteer coordinator for the River Tame Conservation Trust. I've been with the trust for a couple of years now, and I lead on all things volunteers, as well as our communications, both external and internal. So lead a lot of our different citizen science projects and whatnot, and volunteer work parties. My email and phone number are there. I'm going to be sort of your main contact for this project. So please feel free to reach out over email, or give me a message, or give me a bell. David has said, keen to learn more about the Bear Brook in general as one more tributary on the River Tame. Great. Yeah, I have a few slides coming up about the brook more specifically, and then hopefully over the year of the life of this project, we'll actually learn quite a bit more about the brook that we don't even know today. So yeah, that's me. But I am just one of a few others in our team. So who are we as the River Tame Conservation Trust? We are a locally based registered charity. There are 5 of us in the delivery team, so you may end up meeting some of my other colleagues later on in the year. But our mission is to work to enhance the health and biodiversity of the River Tame. We want to do that by working on the ground with communities. And you can see a map here, sort of a stylized map of the River Tame catchment. I've put a bit of an arrow to roughly the Fairford Lees area, because I assume most people watching this are going to be from that part of the world. And the Bear Brook is quite a critical tributary of the River Tame. There's quite a number, and the Bear Brook does flow into the Tame really quite close to Fairford Lees. Yeah, and as a trust, we aim to raise awareness of the river, its tributaries, rivers in general, why they're important, why we need them, why they're so critical for ecology and the habitats that they provide, and then the wildlife that lives there. We also want to encourage public enjoyment of the river. So yeah, get people to connect and interact with the river and understand its place. And our approach overall is evidence-based, but also very collaborative. So we, rely a bunch on academics and scientists and all the amazing research that's come out about ecology and freshwater, water chemistry and whatnot. But we also use a very collaborative approach where we learn so much from people on the ground who have lived for years and years, or maybe even decades and decades in the River Tame catchment and know the land really well. And we aim to bring together all these different people who know different parts and pieces about the river to do really positive things for it. So just to give you a bit of a more visual example of what we do as a trust, I'm just going to run through just sort of a bit of a menu of our work, but honestly, it was quite hard paring down all the things that we do, because we've been around for a bit over a decade now, and we've expanded quite a bit even just in the last few years. So there's quite a bit of work to talk about. One of our major sort of on the ground sort of delivery pieces of work is creating and restoring wetlands and floodplains. Um, so reconnecting rivers to their floodplains where they're naturally meant to overflow in times of high river levels and rain, and the land can hold that water. So we bring the diggers in and scrape out the land and kind of add diversity to the topography. This isn't just good for water quality and flood attenuation. It also creates really fantastic habitat for wildlife, particularly like wading birds and migratory birds. Another thing that we really focus on is addressing the issue of barriers in rivers where they prevent fish from naturally moving up and down rivers. So, the UK and many countries the rivers are just riddled with different human um, sort of structures like weirs and whatnot, historic weirs that often prevent fish from going up or down certain sections of the river because of them. So, in multiple places around the catchment, and hopefully even more in the future, we've addressed these issues either by removing the barrier completely, modifying the barrier so that it is passable to fish, or going around it by creating some sort of bypass channel. So we use lots of different techniques to try and address these. And then another really key piece of our work is working with local farmers and local landowners. We facilitate the Tame Catchment Farm Cluster, which is a really vibrant group of local farmers and land managers who want to work together and collaborate to bring about more water-friendly farming and more wildlife-friendly farming on a landscape scale. And so doing this across farm borders. And that really is one of the biggest key pieces of the work we do, because the River Tame catchment is very rural. Aylesbury is really one of the biggest, more residential built up urban areas, and it's not even a terribly large urban area. Much of the Tame catchment is agricultural land. So, this is more kind of the sort of thing that you guys are likely to get really involved with, which is our citizen science program. So we train lots of citizen scientists in different methods, including river fly, where you're going in and kicking about into a net to collect aquatic invertebrates out of the water. And depending on what you find and how many in these different groups, it can actually give you a score for how healthy a river or stream is, and then you can monitor that over time to try and catch pollution incidents or see if a river is recovering. We do other citizen science techniques like different water quality monitoring techniques. This photo is a group of volunteers going out with bat detectors. We do, wildlife monitoring like that as well. Yeah, so we're really about anyone getting involved in understanding the environment around them. A lot of these techniques take, less than a full day course to learn. Some of them even quicker. You can pick up the methods in, less than an hour and be out on the river and learning things. Another thing that we do out in the river with volunteers is improving river habitat by often putting in-stream structures that are going to improve the diversity of the flow and the quality of the habitat in the banks of the river, as well as the bed of the river, and try and could it sort of improve the path of the river in areas where it's been historically dredged and deepened and over widened and straightened because of historic human modification, often for agriculture or mills. And that's really just such a fun activity to get out in waders and chopping things up and building structures. So hopefully that's something that we can do over the next year or so. And all of this together forwards our mission of working for clean and healthy rivers. And this is just sort of a real quick whistle-stop tour of the work that we do as a trust. So what about this project, the Community Action for the Bear Brook project? So the goal of this project is to establish a new volunteer-led community group, which we'll call CAB for short, The group will be supported by RTCT staff, namely myself, over the next year in which we're being funded for. And this is being done in partnership with the Cold Harbor Parish Council, which is really fabulous because the Parish Council now owns pretty much the majority of the Bear Brook, or the land alongside the Bear Brook. So they've got their own maintenance and management plan, and I'm really hoping that this volunteer-led group can work really closely with the council to deliver some really great benefits for both the community and the brook itself. So what are some of the activities that the group might undertake? One of the big things we'd really love to tackle is the invasive Himalayan balsam, which I'll talk a bit more about later. But yeah, tackling that invasive plant along the Bear Brook would be fantastic because it does have a bit of a stronghold in this area, as well as hopefully training people up on some of the citizen scientist methods that I mentioned, maybe leading some hands-on conservation work parties in stream. Also, we'd really love to run some sort of summertime family event around rivers. So with different stations, getting both kids and adults involved, doing some sampling maybe, or wildlife recording, or crafts, or different games and activities. So that would be something that we'd really like to put on this summer. As well as generally just recording the wildlife and making record of it, submitting it officially so that it can, be recognized at a greater level, as well as sampling the water quality, which a bit of that is already happening in the area, which I will talk about later. And if you're wondering why join this new project, we really see this as being a really great opportunity for connecting with nature, getting outside, getting some exercise, maybe learning something new that you didn't know about rivers or the brook that runs through your community, as well as a bit of a social thing as well, meeting new people and hopefully having a lot of fun. And I do want to say a special thanks to our funder for this project for the next year, which is the John Speed and Lewis Foundation. So a bit of a background on how we got here with this project. So the CAB project was built off of some of our previous efforts to control invasive Himalayan balsam, which grows along the Bear Brook and the Stoke Brook. We've run these work parties sort of on and off for the last, I believe, 4 years or so. And they've been great. We've been able to tackle so much balsam in one day, getting nice big groups of volunteers out. It's a lot of fun, and it really brings people together. But something we were realizing is that a lot of these volunteer work parties were being attended by people who didn't live in Fairfield Lees. A lot of them didn't even live in Aylesbury. We often were getting, corporations and big employers saying, "Oh, can our team come out for a team building day doing a balsam bash?" And we'd say, "Great, yeah, that's wonderful," because we get a nice, big, excited group of volunteers who are just so happy to not be behind their desks. But it sort of struck us that there's so many people living right along this Himalayan balsam that might not even recognize that it's invasive. And if the community were trained up to control this invasive species, it would be such a great opportunity for them to control it really frequently over time, because we were struggling to find funding and time to run these sessions frequently enough, driving up with lots of kit and equipment and, contacting as many people as possible and making sure everyone's there on time and sign the health and safety forms. It just wasn't an effective method for actually controlling the balsam, which you really need to stay on top of year after year after year, to fully control it. So we thought maybe we need to kind of go back to square one and see if there's people in the community who would want to start up their own group, and not just around balsam. Well, that's quite an important goal we want to achieve. There's so many things that could be done in the community around the brook. So we ran an online survey last year in the summer, and the results were really positive. It was really clearly obvious that people had a shared concern about the brook's ecological health, but also that there was a real willingness to address these health issues together. We got almost 40 respondents, and 90% of them highlighted that the brook provides them with an opportunity to spend quality time in nature. So we thought, well, this is great. If we can get people out there spending more time with the brook and giving them a good reason to as well. If it's, go out and if you see some balsam, just pull it up, or go take a water test, or go, photograph some wildlife. It seems like people would be really keen to get involved in that sort of thing. So that's where this project came from. To give you a little context of what we're actually talking about from a more zoomed out view, hopefully you can see my cursor there. There's actually two brooks that run through Fairford Leys, and I know I've been really going on about the Bear Brook, but the Stoke Brook is just as important. We sort of just have narrowed it down to Bear Brook because it is the slightly larger one, and maybe a little bit more well known. But both of them actually arise up here. The Bear Brook actually is called the Wendover Brook when it's up here around Wendover, and then flows into the Bear. But both of these rise up near the Chilterns, which means they are rather influenced by the chalk. The water gets filtered up through the chalk, which is quite an important and quite rare type of habitat. There's not many chalk streams in the world. There's very few in the UK, and a lot of them are in this area. Now, I don't believe the Stoke Brook or the Bear Brook are really officially designated chalk streams, but we've done quite a few walkovers of the headwaters of these brooks, and they do run extremely, extremely clear. And our water quality results have showed that from our volunteers. So these brooks are really, really important. However, they're also quite unique to the Tame catchment because they do run through Aylesbury, which means they are quite influenced by more urban pollution sources than maybe some of our other tributaries of the Tame, which run mostly through agricultural land. And you can see kind of these highlighted areas, the green and the yellow. All of that land that's highlighted is going to be the catchment for each brook. So any water that falls in one of these areas is going to flow into one of these two brooks, depending on which catchment it is. So everything that happens in here does influence what flows downstream and then eventually into the Tame. So I have just clipped here some information from the Environment Agency's website, their Catchment Data Explorer. If you haven't had a look at this before, I definitely recommend it. It basically holds loads and loads of Environment Agency data on the status of different water bodies in the UK. And so I've just pulled out here the Bear Brook and Wendover Brook water body, which they lumped together, which as of 2022 was classed with moderate ecological status. So not bad, but not amazing. If we look down through all the different items that they classified, they did the classification in 2019 and also 2022 with basically the same results. It's my understanding that there will be another round of classification coming out in 2025. That's what I've been told by the EA, and I'm pretty sure that's correct. So we'll get a bit more up-to-date data. All of this is based on the EU's Water Framework Directive, or WFD, if you've heard of that. And it's my understanding that the EA is still going to stick pretty much with the WFD classifications. So things should stay pretty consistent when we get those 2025 results. But as we can see, things are looking all right for the Bear Brook. Particularly the fish are looking really quite good. They're classed as high. And if you go down to the chemical section, it can get a bit confusing. Where you see ammonia, it's classed as high, which might make you think, oh no, high ammonia levels, that seems very bad. But actually, they just use that term high to mean like the highest level of classification. So it means that the ammonia levels are very good because they're very low. So yeah, that is a bit of a confusing point on the EA website there. Now, the thing that really stands out, though, is that the phosphate has been classed as poor in both 2019 and 2022. So that is a nutrient that can come from a multitude of different sources. It can come from sewage treatment works. fertilizer. Uh, Back in the day, a lot of detergents had high phosphate content in them. That's something that has mostly been regulated out, but some industrial practices, if they're not treated correctly and drain into the water bodies, can introduce phosphates. And they're really not good for the environment in high qualities because they can really throw off sort of the equilibrium of the ecosystem, and very kind of nutrient-loving algae can take over and are more sensitive. Algae and plants and wildlife and insects and things start to suffer. So I was mentioning pollution sources, and there are no like large Thames water operated sewage treatment facilities on the Bear Brook, which is great. The Aylesbury Sewage Treatment Works is just down the road from the Bear Brook and from Fairford Leys, but it actually goes out into the main Tame, which is preferable because A, it's a very large sewage treatment works. It's the largest one in the Tame catchment. So having the effluent go into the River Tame, which is much larger, means lots more dilution. Now, just because there's no sewage treatment works on the Bear Brook does not mean there aren't pollution sources. So because it goes through this quite urban area, it's quite influenced by road runoff. We also are very aware of misconnected sewer pipes being an issue in this area. Last year, there, and maybe others will remember this, if you walk your dog around the Bear Brook often, the brook turned almost sort of a blackish blue color. And we were made aware of this by one of our local volunteers in the area who reported it to the Environment Agency and Thames Water, which was absolutely the right thing to do. We always recommend reporting to both of those agencies if you see any sort of pollution in rivers. Well, Thames Water came out and confirmed that it did not come from any of their treatment works, and it did not come from any sort of thing from their infrastructure. And they actually traced it back to an industrial estate where some ink had been poured down, like a road drain or some sort of drain that did not go to the works. It went straight out to the brook. But actually, this ink spill was a bit of a blessing in disguise, because while Thames Water was investigating the ink, they realized that there was actually raw sewage in this spill as well, which was quite odd. And they traced that back to the industrial estate and realized that I think it was multiple of the tenants there were using buildings where the toilets were plumbed incorrectly. And the toilets were literally just plumbed straight into the drain pipes into the Bear Brook, which is quite horrifying to realize that that could happen. We weren't in direct contact with the owner or the tenants in the estate, but it's our understanding that they were quite horrified by this and did their best to rectify it. But it just goes to show that there could be quite a lot of influence in terms of pollution just from misconnected sewer pipes that can go completely undetected. I mean, it's our understanding that this probably had gone on for maybe a decade, if that's how the sewer had been installed when that industrial estate went up. So yeah, definitely an issue that would be a good one to tackle and investigate for the Bear Brook. And of course, we cannot forget the sort of ever-present issue of litter and plastic pollution getting into our streams, particularly around urban areas. So, on to the more kind of invisible pollution, and to kind of give you a background on some of the work that we do and have done in the area. So we run a water quality monitoring network that was set up back in November 2022. This is a network of almost 50 volunteers now monitoring almost 50 different sites all across the Thames. So every single tributary has at least one, if not multiple, monitoring sites on it. And all of these sites get monitored once a month on the first Saturday of the month by our volunteers. And we are able to kind of bring all that data together and then compare it across the catchment. And when we did our comparison for our very first full year of monitoring, The Bear Brook site and the Stoke Brook site, which are both kind of at the very downstream end of those brooks in Fairford Lees, they came out as some of our best top sites in the network, which is really great. I believe the Stoke Brook was actually the very best results, and then the Bear Brook was probably, I think, fourth out of, I think, 36 sites that had enough data to compare. Now, the thing to keep in mind is that this doesn't necessarily mean that the brooks are perfectly clean and perfectly healthy and they have no issues. It just means they were better than all the other sites in the Tame. And unfortunately, the Tame is not doing very well in terms of nutrient pollution, particularly on nitrates. So the nitrates are elevated just all across the Tame catchment. But you can see that reflected here in the Bear Brook. These numbers are sort of color coded, so don't worry if you don't know exactly how many milligrams per liter is unwanted or is too high. Just kind of follow the colors. But yeah, the Bear Brook, even, the median and the mean are showing that there's pretty much always elevated nitrates. The Stoke Brook, on the other hand, on average, is actually doing quite well, which is an uncommon thing in the Tame catchment. Usually nitrate levels are just constantly elevated. And then the Stoke has really low phosphates, which is just wonderful to see that it's not getting influenced by any sort of phosphate pollution. The Bear Brook, on the other hand, seems like on average, it's got okay phosphate levels, but then sometimes there's incidents where it jumps up. But the one thing that really also stands out is the turbidity, which is a measurement of how clear the water is. 14 is basically the lowest our volunteers can record in their turbidity measurements. So both of these are basically crystal clear all the time, which is really lovely. So, I have put this slide here, a bit of a zoomed in view on Fairford Leas with a few images of wildlife that I have known to have been reported in this area. So if you have any sort of comments or stories or know of any other wildlife that lives around Fairford Leas, please do share. Hopefully, after the year of this project, we've collected a really nice body of evidence that even though this brook is quite urban in nature, it's home to loads of really interesting creatures. I've been made aware that there is a nice family of otters that live in the brook. I've seen little egrets myself. I was looking at records on different recording apps, and I saw, there's toads. I believe there's great crested newts around in these fields. So they don't live in the brook themselves, but they are a sign that there is clean water in the landscape, which is fantastic. And yeah, you can also go online to the EA, what is it, the Ecology Data Explorer, and that shows all of their fish records as well. I'm not that good with my fish, but there's dace, I think, and gudgeon and stickleback. It seemed like there was a really nice, healthy population of fish, which also pretty much guarantees that there's quite a healthy population of aquatic invertebrates, which is what those fish will want to be eating. So just to kind of go over, again, potentially what this volunteer group could be doing in the next year. Like I said, balsam bashing is going to be one of our kind of big priorities. And it's quite an easy activity for anyone of any age to get involved in. Identifying balsam is quite easy once you've done it once in the field, even when it doesn't have its really distinctive flowers on it, which hopefully it won't because you do kind of want to pull it ahead of that time. It's still really quite easy to identify, so you're not going to accidentally pull the wrong thing. And it's really easy to pull out of the ground as well. So kids and young people can get involved. Yeah, so that should be something to look forward to. Usually in the kind of May, June into July period, it really depends on the season and how warm it gets. You don't want to pull them when they're really short because then you'll break your back bending down the whole time. But you do want to get on it before they start going to flower and going to seed because they have these explosive seed pods that are an adaptation to spread their seeds just everywhere, which is part of what makes them so invasive. So we do want to get on them before they go to seed. Also, it'd be great to hopefully set up some in-stream habitat work, maybe do some litter picks, some water quality sampling, river fly monitoring, wildlife recording. Outfall safaris are when you go around and you record where all the different pipes are coming into the brook, walking up and down it, and then continuously watching them to see if you see signs of anything coming out of them and describing it, the smell, the color, to try and figure out, maybe if there's those misconnections. Now, I don't know that we're going to do all of this in 1 year, but I definitely want to try and do anything that there is appetite for in the community. And I'm really hoping that this group, as it grows and evolves, will be quite self-directed. And while I am going to be there to support, I'd really love for the group to get to a point where you're sort of leading yourself, and I'm kind of giving you the tools to go out and do what you'd like in your own community. And of course, after the project is over in a year's time ish, I'm absolutely, of course, not going to disappear. And I can see, maybe on the back of this, we get further funding and do a bigger project. Or you guys come get involved in projects in different parts of the catchment and learn from other environmental groups that operate around. But yeah, I'm really quite excited and open to just seeing how things develop with the group as it grows. So what are the next steps? The thing to do if you want to stay involved and get up to date, stay in the loop, get added to our mailing list, is to register on our online volunteer sort of management system. It's called Better Impact. If you scan this QR code, that will take you to the page that describes this project. And I believe at the bottom, or maybe at the top right, it will say, I would like to volunteer, and you'll go fill in an application. If you're having trouble scanning, you can also go to our website, rivertame.org, and click volunteer. And then you can find a link to sign up on Better Impact. But I will need everyone to do this if you do want to be added to the mailing list, which is where after I've run this series of webinars this week, I will then send out a bit of an update, bring everyone together and say, when would we like to meet in person? Because I'm envisioning we do quarterly meetings through this next year. We can also do, kind of a mix, hybrid meetings, or 1 quarter they're in person and 1 quarter they're online. Very happy to work with what people's preferences are. And to figure out also what time works for people. So if we're doing weekday evenings or a weekend afternoon. So yeah, sign up on Better Impact. That is how I will get your information, but in a way that is nice and GDPR secure. And you will also get a chance to read our volunteer agreement, which has got some good important health and safety stuff, as well as just sort of your responsibility as one of our volunteers. And it will just be your general place for getting involved in any of the activities we do. I post different volunteer opportunities that might be happening outside of the Aylesbury area, all around the Tame catchment, that you might be interested in joining us with. So if there are any questions, please do just pop them in the chat and I will answer them. Let's see. No questions from David. That is perfectly all right. With that, I would just leave you with some different ways in which you can connect with us and see the different work that we've done or that we're doing. Our website is a great place to learn more about the projects I was talking about at the beginning, as well as our social media. So Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn. You can find us there, and we're posting a lot more regularly, little updates of what we're doing. And if for any reason, maybe you're not able to join in on this project with your time, but you'd really like to support what we do. We are quite a small charity that really does rely on donations from supporters and from people who want to see healthy rivers. So if you go ahead and scan that QR code, that will take you to the website to donate to the trust. Um, but yeah, if there are no other final thoughts and questions, I will leave you there. But please feel free to reach out and sign up. And if you think of anything later, just send me a message. And really looking forward to working with everyone in the future on the community action for the Bear Brook project. All right, thanks. Take care.